He walked in wearing a faded brown coat, its cuffs fraying and the lining exposed from years of wear. The sort of coat no one in that towering glass building would ever be caught dead in, let alone on a Wednesday morning when all the executives strutted in like peacocks in their pristine Armani. Security already had their eyes on him. His boots were scratched and dust-covered, his beard rough and uneven, and though his back was straight, the weight of something heavier than time bent his shoulders just a little. He waited his turn by the marble receptionist desk, ignored by everyone else like the furniture. "Excuse me," he said softly, when the receptionist finally looked up from her perfectly manicured nails. "I'm here about the job opening, on the maintenance team." She blinked, once, twice, slowly like she couldn't process his existence. Then a smirk curled up her lips. "Do you have an appointment?" she asked, voice coated in cold syrup. "No, ma'am. I just saw the sign outside. Thought maybe someone could talk to me for 5 minutes." She didn't even try to hide the chuckle this time. "That's not how things work here," she said, pulling her tablet close like his breath might infect the electronics. "You can't just walk in and ask for a job." But before she could dismiss him further, a burst of laughter echoed across the foyer. Heads turned. The double glass doors of the private elevator opened, and out walked the CEO himself, Martin Vale, dressed in an ice gray suit so sharp it could have cut the tension in the air. He paused mid-step, eyes catching the stranger like he was dirt-tracked into a clean room. "Now this is new," he said loudly, his voice carrying through the foyer like a whip crack. "What is this? Open mic day at the unemployment office?" A few of the staff chuckled uncomfortably. The poor man didn't flinch. He just nodded politely and turned toward the CEO. "Good morning, sir. I was hoping someone might consider me for the janitorial position. I can work nights, weekends, whatever's needed." Martin raised a sculpted brow. "You think you belong here? In my building?" The man didn't respond. Not with words. He looked around, at the polished floors, the mirrored columns, the walls that sparkled with fake opulence, and then back at the CEO, calm and steady like he'd already been here before in a dream. "Please," the man said gently. "I just need a chance." That did it. Martin laughed, full belly, chest-shaking amusement. "You want a chance? Go back to wherever you came from and earn one. This is not some charity. This is Vale Enterprises. We don't hand out chances like soup bowls." Laughter followed him as he walked away. The man stood there a second longer, then nodded slowly, turned, and walked back out into the city wind. Like, subscribe, and drop a comment to let me know where you're watching from. Your support lets stories like this be told. No one asked his name. No one cared. But 3 days later, the world shifted. Martin Vale was mid-breakfast in the penthouse suite on the top floor, because of course the CEO had a private residence built into the company tower. He was slicing into his poached eggs, when his assistant burst into the room without knocking, red-faced and panting like she'd run through hell. "Sir, you need to come downstairs." He raised an eyebrow. "You know better than to come in here without—" "It's the board," she stammered. "They've called an emergency meeting. Everyone's here, even shareholders, especially shareholders. Something's happened." Martin frowned. He stood slowly, napkin dropped to his plate, and followed her out. The elevator ride felt longer than usual. Every second ticked by like a drumbeat to something ominous. When he walked into the boardroom, silence fell. One by one, the men and women in suits, some older than him, most more powerful, turned to look. Not at him, past him. At the man who was already standing at the head of the table. It was him. The poor man, now wearing a tailored navy suit with a silk pocket square and polished shoes. His beard was groomed, his eyes sharper than before. Standing tall, arms calmly folded, like he owned the air itself, because he did. "What the hell is this?" Martin demanded, stepping forward. "Who let him in here?" Nobody moved. Then, an elderly board member, Mr. Hammond, one of the company's oldest stakeholders, cleared his throat. "Martin," he said gently, "meet Elias Merrick." Martin blinked. "Who?" "The man at the head of the table, Elias smiled. Not cruelly, but with something ancient and knowing in his eyes. Elias Merrick, Hammond repeated. Majority shareholder of Vale Enterprises as of this morning. He just purchased 62% of the company. Silence hit the room like a thunderclap. Martin's voice cracked, disbelieving. That's impossible. Nobody has that kind of money. Nobody. We don't know. Elias stepped forward now, folding his hands on the table, voice smooth like carved mahogany. You don't know me, he said simply, because you never bothered to look down. You only look up, and sometimes the people you step over on your way to the top are the ones holding the ropes. He paused. You laughed in my face, Elias continued, because I wore a coat with holes and asked for a chance. You didn't know who I was. You didn't care. That's the kind of arrogance that crashes empires. Martin shook his head. You're lying. This is a prank. It has to be. But Hammond slid a stack of legal documents forward. The papers are real. The signatures are done. The funds cleared this morning. Elias Merrick is now the primary owner and executive director. Martin looked at everyone in turn, his allies, his friends, his hired yes men, and realized they weren't looking back. They were already aligning with the new sun in the sky, and Elias just stood there, silent, calm, unmoved by Martin's rising. Panic. Martin Vale's skin turned ghost pale beneath the glow of the boardroom lights, his mouth ajar, searching for words that wouldn't come. All his power, the prestige, the deference, the tight grip he held on Vale Enterprises for over a decade, was slipping through his fingers like sand in a storm. And standing in his place, calm as still water, was the very man he'd mocked 3 days earlier. The man in the ragged coat, the one who didn't belong. Elias Merrick. Elias, Martin hissed, voice dry. Who are you? Elias tilted, his head slowly, like the question amused him. Born in a farmhouse in eastern Missouri, he said quietly. 4th of 7. My mother cleaned homes. My father fixed fences until his hands bled. We lived off government cheese and kindness. But I watched them work harder than anyone I've ever seen in these boardrooms. The room was silent. A few execs squirmed in their seats. No one dared interrupt. I dropped out of college to take care of my siblings after my father died, Elias continued. Didn't finish my degree until I was 34. And when I did, I worked nights at a freight dock while building a company out of nothing. That company now owns 12 global firms. He paused just long enough for the weight of that to land. And now it owns yours. Like if this shook you, subscribe for part 3 and comment what country or city you're watching from. We read everyone, and your voice matters more than you think. Martin could feel the heat crawling up his neck, his pulse thudding in his ears. This can't be legal, he said, voice rising. You blindsided me. This company is mine. It was yours, Elias said simply, until you sold out your shareholders' trust for yachts, mistresses, and ego. You over-leveraged the brand to expand into markets you didn't understand. You buried the tech division while pouring billions into vanity projects. You stopped leading and started performing. The market noticed. I just noticed faster. Martin slammed his fist on the table, the sound sharp, desperate. I built this. No, Elias said, eyes suddenly sharp, voice cold. You inherited it. The room shivered with the force of that truth. No one spoke. I built my fortune from nothing, Elias continued. You took a $40 million inheritance and made just enough noise to stay on magazine covers. But let's be clear, this was always going to happen. You just helped me decide when. Martin staggered back from the table, turning toward the few remaining executives who still looked remotely on his side. Are you seriously letting this happen? He barked. You're going to let some nobody sweep in and throw me out? One of the older women, head of international strategy, straightened in her chair and folded her arms. We warned you, Martin, she said coolly. Your leadership was unstable. The Hong Kong deal alone cost us $80 million. Elias saved us. We didn't get swept in. We chose him. Martin's heart pounded in his throat. No, this is theft. I'll sue. You can, Elias said, shrugging. But you'll lose. And if you do, your remaining shares will be liquidated to cover legal costs. You'll walk out with nothing but the echo of your own arrogance. Martin's breath came in short bursts. So what now? He spat. You kick me out of my own tower? Elias stepped forward. No, he said, his voice turning quiet. You are going to walk out on your own with what little dignity you have left. Because if you don't, I will call security, the same ones who nearly threw me out 3 days ago. The irony burned like acid. You have 15 minutes to collect your things, Elias said. After that, your access is revoked, permanently. Martin looked around one last time, hoping for someone to defend him. But the chairs stayed silent, the faces turned away. When he finally left the room, his steps were slow, dragged, the echo of them hollow on the marble floors he once strutted across like a king. The story, of course, didn't end there. News of the boardroom coup exploded across the media within hours. Business journalists went feral. Stranger overthrows CEO in dramatic hostile takeover trended globally. Reporters circled the Veil Tower like sharks at a feeding frenzy, desperate for a quote from Elias Merrick, the mystery man in the tailored suit who came out of nowhere. But Elias didn't give interviews. He didn't chase the spotlight. He just went to work. In 1 week, he reversed half the reckless decisions Martin had made. The canceled tech division, reinstated, the abused interns, now protected under new internal policy. Even the janitorial staff received better wages and full benefits, one of the first actions Elias signed as majority owner. But behind the scenes, something deeper stirred. Because not everyone at Vale had forgotten that first morning. Not the receptionist who laughed at Elias when he showed up in the tattered coat. Not the security guards who refused him entry without a second glance. And certainly not the employees who had grown used to judging people by their shoes and watches and the company card they swiped. One day, during a team-wide restructuring meeting, Elias paused mid-sentence and gestured toward the young receptionist who sat stiffly in the corner, pale as a ghost. You, he said. What's your name? She swallowed. Clara, sir. You were working the front desk last Monday, weren't you? Clara froze. The entire room held its breath. Elias walked slowly toward her, then stopped with a soft smile. You judged me, he said, voice calm. You laughed at me. She blinked rapidly. I didn't mean... I know, he said gently. We're taught to think success always dresses a certain way. That power speaks with a loud voice. That wealth doesn't wear worn boots. He let the silence settle. But I want you to learn this lesson now, he said. Because it will change your life if you do. Her eyes glistened. She nodded. You're not fired, Elias added, softer now. But from today on, you're off the front desk. You're being trained under executive client services. Because if you can learn to see past appearances, you'll go far. Clara gasped. People murmured. It wasn't a punishment. It was a chance. Because Elias didn't just take over a company. He started changing the culture, and everyone would feel it, especially the ones who had once looked down on the man in the ragged coat. 3 weeks passed, and the entire company began to feel it, like the air had shifted, like the marble halls now echoed with something more than hurried footsteps and hushed boardroom whispers. It was respect. It was humility. It was the weight of a new kind of leadership, the kind that didn't walk past janitors like they were shadows or call interns by the wrong name. Elias Merrick had not just taken control of Vale Enterprises, he was rebuilding it from the inside out, layer by aching layer. The ones who had laughed now watched with wide, silent eyes. Departments once starved for resources were flourishing. Elias walked the halls daily, speaking to the team leads, the mail runners, the cafeteria workers. And when he asked, "How's your day going?" people slowly realized he meant it. Promotions weren't based on whispered politics anymore, but on effort. Raises began appearing in paychecks. Entire lives changed. But not all were celebrating. Because in a loft across town, in an apartment much too quiet, Martin Vale sat alone, eyes bloodshot, days unshaven, watching the news play his downfall over and over again like a broken symphony. Headlines that had once heralded his wins now spit out phrases like disgraced ex-CEO, ousted in historic takeover, fallen giant. His phone didn't ring anymore. No more parties, no more dinners, no more invitations, and worst of all, no more loyalty. He called his lawyer, called his PR firm, called even his cousin who worked at one of the banks, but no one would touch him. His brand was toxic. Every door he once slammed in others' faces was now closed to him. Still, pride is a strange disease. It whispers when everyone else has gone quiet. So Martin Vale put on his best remaining suit, the one from Milan that still smelled of citrus cologne and old entitlement, and he walked straight back into the building he no longer owned. Not with an ID card, not with permission, but with purpose. Like if you're shocked he came back, subscribe so you never miss a moment, and comment where in the world you're watching from. We love hearing your stories. The moment Martin stepped through the front doors, the air thickened. Heads turned. The security team, newly trained, newly professional, stood tall at the ready. But Elias had left standing orders. If Martin ever returned, let him through. No handcuffs, no scene. Just let him see. So he rode the elevator up. Each. Ding a countdown. He walked the hall to the executive floor, past the corner office that used to belong to him. The nameplate was already changed. Elias Merrick. The door was open. Elias sat at the desk. Not lounging, not smirking, just signing papers with quiet authority. A single mug of black coffee beside him. When he saw Martin's reflection in the glass, he didn't flinch. He turned around slowly. "Martin," he said, "you're earlier than I expected." Martin's nostrils flared. "You expected me?" Elias gave the smallest nod. Pride is predictable. Martin stepped inside, letting the door click shut behind him. "You've made your point," Martin said, his voice low. "You humiliated me. You took everything. But you've also proven what kind of man you are. The world saw it." "I hope so," Elias said calmly. "Because that was the point. To show the world you never deserved the power you had." "I built this company," Martin growled. "No," Elias said again softly. "You inherited it, and then you hollowed it out, like a ship with golden sails but a rotting hull." Martin stepped closer to the desk. "Then why not destroy me completely? Why let me in this building again?" Elias's eyes darkened, not with anger, but with something much deeper. "Because," he said, "men like you only learn when you see what you could have been." He stood up slowly, walking past Martin to the glass wall behind the desk. He gestured down at the city, their empire. "I'm not here for revenge, Martin. I don't want your pain. I want your understanding. I want you to see that every person you stepped over had a story. That every hand you didn't shake could have been the one to save you. You think this was about power? It wasn't. This was about respect." Martin stared at him, then quietly, "I want back in." Elias turned his head slowly. "I don't want the title," Martin added quickly. "Just a role. Anything. I'll consult, advise. I can help you. You're not a Vale. You don't know how deep the roots go. I do." Elias paused for what felt like a year. Then he looked Martin in the eyes, and for the first time, he didn't look like a rival. He looked like a man who saw a broken shell in front of him. "You'll start in operations," Elias said. "Level 6, no corner office, no assistant, no salary above market. You'll be trained by a man named Rodrigo. You remember him? You laid him off during Christmas. He took 2 buses just to get to work." Martin blinked. "You're giving me a job?" "I'm giving you a chance," Elias said. "Same thing you refused me. Let's see if you make more of it." Martin didn't respond, just nodded, slowly, and left the office. 2 weeks later, Martin Vale sat in a cubicle the size of a closet. He answered calls, took meeting notes, filed reports under Rodrigo, a quiet, dignified man who never once gloated, never once brought up the past. And every morning, Martin watched Elias from afar, speaking to people by name, remembering birthdays, lifting up those who had been invisible for too long. Something began to change in Martin. He still wore his suits, still kept his chin up, but there was something less polished now, something humbled. He listened more, laughed less cruelly, He even started using the company cafeteria like everyone else. No special orders, no line skipping. One day, as he passed the lobby, he saw Elias standing beside a janitor. They were laughing, together, and for the first time in his adult life, Martin didn't walk faster past a cleaner. He stopped and said, "Good morning." Winter came. Not just to the city streets that wrapped around the glass walls of Vale Tower like cold veins, but to every corner of the building itself, metaphorically, emotionally. The final quarter of the fiscal year loomed, and tensions were high. But something was different this year. There was no frantic chaos, no executive yelling at assistants, no unjust firings. Because this winter, the company wasn't run by pride or vanity. It was run by a man who once walked in with holes in his coat, humiliated at the front desk, Elias Merrick, and he had one last card to play, but not out of vengeance. Out of truth. Don't forget to like for Elias's journey, subscribe for more jaw-dropping stories, and comment where you're watching from. I see you out there in NYC, Manila, Lagos, London, Sydney. Let's finish this together. 1. Cold Friday morning, every employee received an email titled, "Mandatory All-Hands Meeting, 10 a.m." Speculation shot through the building like wildfire. Some said Elias was announcing a merger. Others said layoffs. A few still whispered the old name, Martin Vale. Some wondered if he had somehow clawed his way back to power. But no one knew. By 10:02 a.m., the entire company had gathered in the massive glass auditorium, its ceiling stretching so high it reflected the sky itself. The mood was electric. Anticipation crackled like static on the air. And then the doors opened. And in walked Elias alone, no entourage, no notes. Just a man in a simple charcoal suit walking like he had nothing to prove, because he didn't. He stepped onto the stage, and he looked at them. Not past them, not above them, at them. "I want to tell you a story," Elias began, his voice calm, but carrying power in every syllable. "About a man who once came to this building wearing a coat that had seen better days. He didn't have an appointment, he didn't have credentials, he didn't have a name anyone recognized. All he had was a willingness to work. He stood in this very lobby and asked for a chance. He was laughed at, mocked, dismissed. Murmurs rippled across the crowd. Everyone knew who he meant. But they didn't expect what came next. That man was me." Silence. Total. And then Elias said the thing that no one, not one soul, expected. "And I'm not the only one." He turned toward the back of the room and raised his hand. The side door opened, and in walked 6 employees. Faces no one paid much attention to on a regular day. The night janitor, the elevator technician, the cafeteria dishwasher, the woman from the mailroom, a security guard, and finally, a former intern. Each of them stood in line behind Elias. "You've seen these people every day," Elias continued, "but you've never seen them. You walk past them. You ignore their names. But without them, this building does not function. They are this company. They are the backbone you've never thanked." Then he stepped aside and gestured toward the microphone. Each person, one by one, told their story. The janitor had worked here for 17 years. Never missed a single day, not even when his wife died. The elevator technician had prevented 3 mechanical disasters and once stayed 24 hours in the building during a blackout. The intern had slept in her car for 3 weeks just to afford the unpaid internship Vale had offered, and when they were done, Elias stepped forward again. "These people are not invisible anymore. Today we're launching a new program. Equity. For effort, every non-executive employee in this company will receive profit sharing based on tenure and impact. That includes janitors, that includes kitchen staff, that includes the people you never invite to your department holiday parties." Applause. Loud, growing. But Elias wasn't finished. He held up a thick envelope. "I also have here the final signed document. The last transfer of ownership for Vale Enterprises." He paused. "Effective today, this company is no longer called Vale Enterprises." The room inhaled. From now on, it will be known as Merrick & Kowa, a company that doesn't wear pride like armor, A company where no one is above cleaning a floor and no one is beneath holding a title. Gasps. Then cheers. It wasn't just a name change, it was a rebirth. Down on the 6th floor, Martin Vale sat at his cubicle and listened to the announcement through the internal broadcast system. He didn't speak, didn't smile, didn't scoff. He just stared at his screen as the new logo appeared at the bottom right of every monitor. Merrick & Co. Built by everyone. He exhaled, and for the first time in his life, he truly understood. Later that day, as employees filed out into the crisp afternoon, they found new plaques being installed on the walls, not just of founders or board members, but of people from every level of the company, those who had been overlooked for years. In the lobby, a permanent memorial was unveiled, a bronze statue of 2 hands, one reaching down, the other reaching up. The inscription read, "No one climbs alone." And Elias? He didn't throw a party. He didn't post a speech on social media. He stayed late that night, long after the applause faded. He walked the empty halls, flicked off the conference room lights, and stood alone by the window, because some victories don't require noise, just change. The next morning, a little girl in a faded hoodie walked into Merrick & Co.'s lobby, holding a small folder. The new receptionist smiled and knelt to her level. "Hi there, can I help you?" The girl held up her folder. Inside was a drawing of a man in a torn coat, and above it, written in uneven handwriting, "Someday I want to work here, like him." The receptionist blinked away tears and smiled. "You already belong." The end. Drop a comment. Where are you watching this from? Did this story hit you in the heart like it did for us?